Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. And last week saw the release of God of War Valhalla, a surprise free DLC for God of War Ragnarok. This DLC got a lot of hype because a lot of devs in the trailer itself were kind of hinting at Greece things being in this DLC. And well, they were right. There was a lot of Greek stuff, from carrying the head of Helios to going back to previous boss locations. It was quite the trip and treat for OG God of War fans. And it all culminated in the final scene where Kratos comes face to face with his former Greek self. And instead of having them fight, we get this really deep introspective monologue that really shows us how far Kratos has come. We see him come to terms with his past actions and accept that though his actions should not be excused or forgiven, he gets to choose who he is now and today, as he potentially accepts his role as a god again. And the DLC chooses to end off with a shot reminiscent of the original game's ending. Whereas in the original game, Kratos is left unsatisfied after giving into his violent tendencies and not even learning anything. Here at the ending of this new DLC, we see Kratos kind of assuming the same similar role as a god, while choosing to be better today and hoping that it will bring good. It was quite the character moment, but you know me, during this entire sequence I was thinking one thing: which Kratos would beat who in a fight? I know, when dissecting media, I have my priorities. That's all I'm gonna say. And to be fair, how could I not be thinking about this? This matchup is quite contentious, and there are lengthy arguments to both sides. So join me today as we'll find out which Kratos is stronger. Is the revenge-driven, angry Kratos of Greece stronger, or the older and wiser, slower to conflict version of Kratos we see in the Norse duology the stronger of the two? Is this answer extremely obvious, or are appearances quite deceiving? Join us today as we'll find out which Kratos is stronger. But before that, if you like the power scaling content, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. We post weekly videos and we cover a wide variety of topics. From Godzilla to Final Freddy's, this is the place you want to be at. But with all that garbage out the way, let's get into the matchup. Okay, for this matchup, we'll cover 3 perspectives. We'll start off with feats purely found in each saga, then we'll move on to inverse and scaling, and then we'll clear up some other metas. And I think by the end of all that, the winner should be clear. But starting off with Greek Kratos, he should be at least low multiversal to arguably even multiversal. I've scaled him in the past, and I'm gonna play a 1-minute segment from one of my old videos. The timestamp will be here if you don't want to rewatch it, but looking at the views of that video in comparison to every other video I've posted since then, it seems like most of you guys haven't even seen the video. So for a decent chunk of you guys, it will be new. Alright, past Goji-Chronic, take it away. Fortunately for us, his scaling is pretty straightforward. Kratos beats Zeus, Zeus upscales the Olympians upscale the Titans, and the Titans upscale the Primordials. Fairly straightforward scaling chain, I know, but what are the feats of some of these guys? Well, for starters, the lowest people at the chain were the Primordials, and they created the God of War cosmology merely as a consequence of their battle. This is important to note because the God of War cosmology is composed of multiple infinite-sized realms, so it would be a low multiversal construct. The Titans upscale the Primordials as they beat and replace them, as confirmed by author statements, and the Olympians beat the Titans. To add some consistency to this level of power, one of the Titans, Atlas, was able to hold the entire cosmology with his back. Kratos has shown relative strength to Atlas, and he was able to beat Kronos, who was the god and king of the Titans, so he would be the strongest. And as previously mentioned, Kratos scales to Zeus, Zeus being a character who's narratively implied to be able to one-shot Poseidon and Hades, who are the strongest of the Olympians. And once again, Kratos is upscales. But overall, considering and analyzing the feats from the 3 games, he would be around low multiversal. But you could try to argue multiversal due to how casual beings who don't even scale to the Olympians were able to create the entire cosmology as a result of their battle. As for speed, he would range anywhere from infinite to immeasurable speed, as even going as far back as the Greek saga, he would scale to the light of Helios, which he could react to and fight people who could dodge it. The light of Helios could illuminate the entire underworld, which has multiple statements confirming it to be infinite in size. Moving on to the inaccessible speed stuff, he would upscale the Primordials, who existed before time, and they were able to move around and fight in it, meaning they can move around in spaces with 0 time, so inaccessible. I know I said for that speed section he could get to immeasurable, but that comes from stuff that would imply relativity to the Norse realms. And since I'm talking about stuff that can only be found in the Greek games, Greek Kratos does not have immeasurable speed. But anyways, thanks for watching that old part of the video. I didn't want to repeat myself and take time editing all that, but don't worry, everything from here should be new. So now that we have the stats of Greek Kratos, how does his older counterpart compare? In order to talk about how strong Norse Kratos is in the 2 games, we're gonna have to talk about the gods that he fights. You can easily get the Norse pantheon into the same low multiversal to multiversal category, and this is due to Odin, a character that Kratos should scale to, being able to kill the giant Ymir. Ymir is stated to be an embodiment of pure creation, and everything in the verse spawned from him. This is important because Odin would go on to kill Ymir, and Ymir's blood threatened to flood all of creation, and Odin would use Ymir's body part parts to construct the 9 realms, which are separate universal-sized constructs. These individual realms have their own different earths, space, and time, meaning at bare minimum, Odin should be around low multiversal. Kratos should scale to him somewhat, so even using feats from the Norse games, the Norse pantheon would still be around low multiversal, same as the Greek saga, but we can get them a lot higher. Going back to Ymir for a second, everything in creation spawned from him, including the Yggdrasil. The Yggdrasil being a construct that transcends space and time and dimensions, meaning that it will be a 5th dimensional construct. Or for power scaling terms, it will be low complex multiversal. The Yggdrasil is quite massive as well, as it's stated to have infinite strands, and it's stated to stretch on into infinity, meaning that the tree would be an infinite 5th dimensional construct. Even lower ace tier than Odin, such as Thor, are capable of splintering the tree, and objectively weaker characters than Kratos, such as Freyr, are shown capable of stopping the final death blow of Surtur. Post-game, it's stated that this very attack shook the Yggdrasil down to its very roots, meaning that Infinite 5D Kratos by the Norse saga is consistent. Kratos, even as early as in God of War 2018, was shown able to amp himself using dues of the Yggdrasil itself, and he should scale to the tree pretty casually. But to really cement how powerful Kratos is in comparison to the tree, we're gonna have to talk about how he scales in relation to Odin, as Odin has many inverse instances that will put him massively above the Yggdrasil. Odin in God of War 2018 was shown to create a tree so powerful that not even Mjolnir could destroy it. A weapon, as previously mentioned, could splinter the Yggdrasil. Another blatant instance of Odin upscaling the Yggdrasil is by the curse that he puts on Freya. Freya is basically cursed by Odin, in which she just can't leave Midgard, and if she tries to enter any other realm, she just gets sucked back in. But during the events of Ragnarok, it's revealed that Odin placed this spell on Freya by literally knotting the roots of the world tree itself. Kratos, as shown by the end of God of War Ragnarok, can actually damage Odin, so he should scale to him a little bit. But as for sheer attack potency, Kratos would just be infinite 5D, or low complex multiversal. As for speed, he should automatically have immeasurable speed, as he scales to characters who can hit snakes so hard that they travel back in time, so that's pretty blatant immeasurable speed right there. Okay, now that I've covered Norse Kratos, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that he outscales by a pretty drastic degree. So if we only took into account attack potency and speed, Norse Kratos would have a massive advantage in both of these departments. And in terms of pure scaling and feats, Norse Kratos has the better stuff, objectively speaking. But what does inverse scaling say about this matchup? How do the Norse characters feel about the Greek gods? What does Kratos say about the Greek gods in comparison to the gods that he's fighting now? What do the gameplay creative directors say? What does the lore say? And more importantly, what does the narrative imply? It's important to note that Inverse firmly establishes relativity between both eras of God of War, but I mainly did it to show you guys that Norse Kratos is not a pushover, because if Norse Kratos has statements saying that he's the stronger of the two, I know there will be a few people saying that he doesn't have the feats to back it up, which, as I've pointed out, is just wrong. So let's get into the inverse scaling. For pretty blatant stuff, Cory Barlog, the director of God of War 4, as well as a writer for God of War 2, has stated that old Kratos would beat his younger self without question. And he's also stated that he actually has a portion of the power of hope that he used to beat fear Zeus.
Much of giving you an insight into his inner life, right? That
Sure.
There is a desire, a little bit of hope that he didn't give to mankind, that he left inside of there. But
the same fear Zeus that one-shotted Greek Kratos. The God of War 2018 novelization also continues this trend, as it has statements that say Baldur was stronger than anything Kratos had ever faced up until that point. Thor also has statements that say that he hits as hard as anyone Kratos has ever fought. Keep in mind, he's talking about the first encounter with Thor, so the hits that he's talking about are hits that were not really going all out, because he was instructed not to kill Kratos. For some other stuff now, a PlayStation description for Ragnarok states that Kratos will be tested like never before during his fights in order to protect his family, which supports all the other stuff, which supports scaling. And even as recently as the new DLC of Valhalla, Kratos states that Tyr is one of the most formidable enemies he's ever fought. And in the description for this DLC, it stated that Kratos would have to master his mind and body in order to conquer the trials of Valhalla. And that's pretty much it for the most part, and it all supports the Norse saga being stronger, as they have better feats, lore implications, and Kratos himself acknowledges them for their power. Keep in mind, Kratos trained in between 2014 and Ragnarok, so with all this, why do people think that Greek Kratos is stronger? What are his arguments? Greek Kratos' arguments spawn from 4 things, so let's start off simple. Bruno V, a graphical designer, states that Zeus is stronger than Thor and Baldur. First of all, guys, Bruno was only a graphics and animations guy, while Cory Barlog is literally the lead writer and director for the freaking game in question. So any statement that Cory makes would kind of override anything contradictory that Bruno says, as Cory had a higher role in the game's development than he did. To understand the role and power that Cory Barlog had on the set of God of War 2018, I want to talk about Matt Suppos and Richard Richard Gilbert. These guys were narrative designers for God of War 2018, and they described it as a collaborative process that was still ultimately Corey's vision. I'll put that clip right now.
Do you think it's fair to call him an auteur, or how would you describe his role in the process? Like, is it his vision you guys are trying to get up to speed with? How much is it a giant melting pot?
You know, I mean, it started out as his vision, and then it becomes a melting pot, and then it goes back to being his vision, and then back to the melting pot, and then ultimately his vision. Yeah, I mean,
Another instance is Jeff Sharoff, the gameplay director, so someone who's probably higher than Bruno, states that the play pyramid notes that they used to kind of create the entire game was using a foundation that came from Corey, and it was only a matter of following it.
And so the play pyramid for us was a way for us to kind of, one, get an entire team, you know, to get on board with this vision. This vision really just kind of existed in Corey's head for a really long time.
So when using word of God statements, you gotta understand that Cory Barlog is he's top dog. But we can go even further, as Bruno has stated multiple things that are contradictory to lore or just plain out wrong. And he stated himself that everything he says is just his opinion or what he thinks, and he's conceded that he isn't an expert on the narrative of the game. And there are questions that he just says he doesn't know the answer to. So don't use those statements, guys. Alright, now the second argument that Greek fans like to source is the fact that Freya states that no magic in the Norse realms is equivalent to the magic that the Fates used. People use that one-off statement to say that the magic of Greece and therefore their power is more potent than anything in the Norse realm, and at best it's just a very blatant example of misinterpretation, as the context is that the Sisters of Fate could literally change fate and their power could be harnessed to go back in time and change fate manually like that, while as in the Norse realms the Norns could only read the future. So in the full context, it just means the magic of Greece is more versatile in its abilities. It seems to be an in-universe explanation as to why the Norse gods don't have as much power showcases as the Greek gods. And let me reiterate, when I say that the Norse gods don't have as much power showcases as the Greek ones, I'm not saying the Norse gods don't have the feats, because they do. We talked about that. Rather, I'm just saying that the Norse gods can't do quite as much as the Greek gods. Like Poseidon can turn himself into a giant monster. Zeus can just pull a Dragon Ball and like aura key his freaking lightning. So yeah, it just means the Greek gods can do a lot more popcorn stuff. But if you're a follower of this channel, just because something looks bigger doesn't mean that it's actually stronger. In order to drive this point in, let's go back to the novel for a second, where Kratos, who is stronger than his former self, during the events of God of War 2018, describes the curse that Odin had placed on Freya while he was trying to pull her back as something very, very strong. But the novel is actually really apparent about how powerful Odin's magic is. Also stated that in all of Kratos' memories, he had never encountered something that potent, and then Kratos says pretty blatantly the magic was far more powerful than anything he's ever faced before. Meaning that yes, Norse magic is more powerful, but Greek stuff can just do more crap, which doesn't mean that it's stronger. Another instance is Brock hyping up the Blades of Chaos. Greek heads try to argue that this scene is Brock totally conceding to the power of the blades and saying that any weapons he's ever made is just garbage in comparison, which at best is just overreading of the scene and at worst just disingenuous, as all he says is the blades are special and he knows quality. At best, this would only imply relativity to all of his other weapons, which is still quite the feat, but it's not what they're trying to assert. This is supported by feats, as the Blade of Olympus, the most powerful weapon in all the Greek saga, has objectively worse feats and showings than even Thor's hammer. To start to explain this, the blade could not kill Zeus, a being weaker than Baldur, who himself was weaker than Kratos. Kratos, after 3 years of constant training, was killed by a blow from Thor's hammer. To put that into perspective, Kratos is immortal, and Kratos, while weaker than he was in 4, was able to survive stabbing himself with the weapon due to his immortality, while Thor's hammer was just so powerful, it literally bypassed Kratos' immortality. A stronger Kratos' immortality as well. The Leviathan axe that Kratos uses is narratively implied to be an equal to Thor's hammer, and it's supported by feats in the game. But using the previously mentioned scaling chain, the Norse weapons are stronger than the ones from the Greek era. And the final and perhaps the most desperate instance that the Greek fans love to use is the bedtime story that he tells to Atreus before Ragnarok. Kratos tells a story about a man who's a stand-in for himself, and in the story he got weaker after time. People used to say that by the Norse era he's weaker due to the flow of time. And as we'll see, this is a gross oversimplification of the story. So let me tell you what the story is actually about. Grab some popcorn while I teach some of the Greek era enthusiasts narrative implications. The story is actually about Kratos' time in Greece. He says in which there was a man bearing logs. The logs in the story is a metaphor for his vengeance. The logs in the story he delivered to his people, meaning that he delivered his vengeance to any man, woman, titan, or god that stood in his way. Kratos also says that the man bore his logs until the weight became too much for him. With the previously mentioned insight, this means that the weight of his vengeance became too much to carry, which just means by the end of God of War 3, after killing the Greek gods and seeing the damage that he caused to the world, the weight of guilt became too much for God of War 3 Kratos to hold. The man in the story also drops the logs and calls for death to come onto him, which literally correlates with Kratos stabbing himself with the blade of Olympus. Okay, so I hope that cleared everything up. I can confidently assert that Norse Kratos is the stronger of the two. This line of thinking is consistent with scaling, inverse direct comparisons, and even word of God statements. And all of the Greek Kratos arguments simply are not that good, and they don't hold up too well to scrutiny. So in conclusion, the answer to who's the stronger of the two is pretty obvious. If you guys made it to the end of this video, I'd like to thank you, but much more importantly, I would like to thank Edgar for helping me with this video. Last time he helped me with one of these videos, I said his name wrong, so that was very bad of me. I apologize, Edgar. I believe he has a YouTube channel, so I'll put that junk on screen right now. Please subscribe, make his day. Without his help, I couldn't make this video, like objectively speaking. But anyways, do you guys agree with the video? Do you have any contentions? Drop them in the comments, let me know. I'll be back next week, but until then, stay big, G fans.